Yeah.
Order.
I'll take care.
Welcome to meeting number 35 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Fisheries and Oceans. This meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of June 23, 2022. Before we proceed, I would like to make a few comments for the benefit of witnesses and members. Please wait until I recognise you by name before speaking. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourselves when you are not speaking. Interpretation for those on Zoom, you have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either Floor, English or French. For those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. Please address all comments through the chair. Finally, a reminder that screenshots or taking photos of your screen is not permitted. The proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted on January 20, 2022, the committee is resuming its study of the North Atlantic right whale. For the first hour and a half, we will hear from witnesses for this study. We will then use the last half hour of the meeting for committee business in camera. I would like to welcome our first panel of witnesses representing the Fédération Régionale Acadienne des Pêcheurs Professionnels. We have Jean Latang, Director General, and Martin Noel, President of the Association des Pêcheurs Professionnels Crabbiers Acadiens. Representing Fish Food and Allied Workers, Unifor, we have Mr. Keith Sullivan, President. And representing Grand Manan Fishermen's Association, we have Bonnie Moore, Project Manager. Thank you for taking the time to appear today. You will each have up to 5 minutes for an opening statement, and I will invite Mr. Latang and Mr. Noel to begin. When you're ready, please. 5 minutes or less.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Monsieur le Président, juste un petit moment.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. I would like to ensure that all technical tests have been carried out so that the sound for the interpreters is good. Has everybody gone through a sound test? And is everybody wearing a good headset?
Here. So the clerk said it was okay to start. Obviously, the sound checks have been done. And we'll continue now with the opening statement as requested.
Parfait. Merci.
Monsieur le Président, bonjour.
Mr. Chairman, good afternoon, and good afternoon to committee members. In order to make the most of the time I have, I will immediately move to the topic under discussion today. Since 2017, the presence of right whales in the Gulf has taken up all our time. There is no sound from the speaker. The speaker is not audible. DFO has implemented a June 30th closure date. It used to be July 15th. Excuse me, Mr. Chairman. I would like us to begin from the beginning because the first part of the testimony was not audible. Thank you.
From the top again, because there for a while it seemed like you were muted or there was something wrong with the mic. We weren't picking up any sound at all. So just so as the members can hear your full statement, we'll start the timer again. Thank you.
Vous m'entendez bien maintenant?
Can everyone hear me now? Right. In order to make the most of the time I have, I'm going to move immediately to the topic under discussion. Since 2017, the presence of right whales in the Gulf has completely taken up the agendas of everybody involved with the fishing industry in Atlantic Canada. Our snow crab fishery has been the most affected, and I'd like to talk about safety at sea today. First of all, since 2018, June 30th is the closure date applied by DFO. It used to be July 15th. The fishing season is therefore 15 days shorter than it was. And this means fishers have to catch their quotas as quickly as possible. This loss of fishing time, which is significant, is added to the number of days that can be fished before right whales arrived. The industry has to be ready to start fishing as soon as possible, and this can become risky in spring, late winter. Even though we talk a lot about global warming, winter in the Gulf of St. Lawrence is a difficult and risky season. Since 2018, there have been major efforts to clean the channels, to clear them. But the Coast Guard, fishing ports, boat storage centres, private companies of all kinds, not to mention processing plants, all have to contribute so that the fishery can begin as quickly as possible. And all that is done in the winter conditions. This year, the season began on April 13th. This was an appropriate start date. But ultimately, I think you'll agree, Mother Nature decides on when the fishery can start. Some people and organizations advocate a fixed date so that anybody who wants to go out should be able to. But we are against that approach. We have an opening day committee made up of all stakeholders, including DFO, the Coast Guard, and Environment Canada. We believe that this is the best way to ensure a safe start to the fishery for everyone. Otherwise, there's a very high risk, far too high, of loss of life. I will now turn the mic over to my chair. Thank you for hearing me. Mr. Chairman, committee members, thank you for inviting me to this meeting. I'm Martin Noël, and I'm a snow crab fisher. I'm a captain, the owner of a family business, and we're the third generation of fishers. Since 2018, measures have been imposed on fishers. Measures have changed recently, and there are now temporary and seasonal closures instead of static closures. While the industry has welcomed these changes, we think there is room for making adjustments and improving the measures to minimize the impact on the fishery while protecting the right whale. Having seasonal closures only from June onwards and using acoustic buoys to reopen closed areas are proposals we've made. The NB Traditional Crabbers Associations are in the third year of sea trials for ropeless technology, and we're very proud of the progress we've made, but there's still significant improvements to be made, although fishers are becoming more interested. Some NGOs say that we're world leaders in this category. We are working closely with the Campobello Whale Rescue Team on establishing and training a Gulf disentanglement team whose mission is to rescue entangled whales. We're also working on projects to recover lost gear and invisible gear. Regarding the requirements for modifying gear by January 2023, we're concerned about this measure, which is intended to reduce the duration and severity of potential entanglement. Tests and sea trials carried out in recent years have made it possible for us to set aside or keep some methods without actually being able to determine which would be most effective in achieving our goal. The solution must be safe to operate and safe for crew members. If we are forced to modify our equipment and as a result this makes vessels less safe, we will lose more traps at sea and there will be more lost gear and more invisible gear. We'll be missing our goals at all levels. There has been unprecedented cooperation among NGOs, DFO, and the fishing industry, without which we could not make progress. Financial support from the Canadian and New Brunswick governments is essential if we are to adapt. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We'll now go to Mr. Sullivan for 5 minutes or less, please.
Okay, I hope you're hearing me well. So thank you. And on behalf of 13,000 members from Newfoundland and Labrador, thank you for the opportunity to speak to the members today. The Fish Food and Allied Workers Union represent 10,000 professional fish harvesters in our province and many more workers in processing. And the FFAW appreciates the need to protect endangered right whales. We have been long dedicated to sustainability and contribute to a wide variety of science and conservation, including ghost gear removal, and work with SARA-listed species such as wolffish and turtles. However, there's been practically no engagement from DFO with harvesters in Newfoundland and Labrador on this topic. In many ways, it's not surprising because it's extremely uncommon to see these whales, and especially not overlapping with our snow crab and lobster fishing. There's simply no evidence of entanglements in decades to mirror encumbrances on Newfoundland and Labrador harvesters that appear to be designed for other fisheries in other environments. Harvesters in Newfoundland and Labrador were upset to see the Sea-Watch red listing and their disregard for recognizing the differences in regional fisheries. Wayne Ledwell of the Whale Release and Strandings Group was interviewed on September 20th by the CBC broadcast. He described sightings of right whales as sporadic and remarked that he does not believe Newfoundland and Labrador waters are the right habitat for the animals. Ledwell acknowledges that fishing gear in Newfoundland waters pose little risk to an entanglement, specifically in fixed gear fisheries such as snow crab, lobster, and gillnet fisheries. Snow crab from this province is certified by the world's most recognized seafood sustainability standard, the Marine Stewardship Council. The value of lobster to harvesters in this province continues to grow. Over the last 10 years, the value of our lobster harvest increased from $17 million to more than $100 million annually. FFAW members took on the work and cost to implement colored rope schemes despite the lack of right whales in their waters during fisheries. DFO have not meaningfully engaged harvesters in Newfoundland and Labrador on these issues and refuse to acknowledge input from experienced, knowledgeable harvesters. In 2021, DFO held 3 virtual meetings in a feeble effort to consult with over 3,000 fishing enterprises that could be affected by this new policy. The meetings were 2.5 hours long and with 40 minutes of discussion following a presentation by DFO, and it cannot be considered a method of proper stakeholder consultation. FFAW raised the question with DFO, why does BC or Nunavut not have to implement this if they also have endangered species in their waters? DFO's response was that there's no proof of gear entanglements of the endangered species in these waters. Ultimately, what is being proposed as a solution to a problem that doesn't really exist in Newfoundland and Labrador is deeply flawed. Number one, it is significantly more likely to lead to increased entanglements of other marine mammals that are prevalent in our waters due to more vertical lines through the water column. Fisheries around Newfoundland and Labrador use gear in long fleets, thus minimizing the vertical lines in the water. For example, harvester may have 70 snow crab traps in a fleet that has only 2 vertical lines. Clearly, moving to 20 vertical lines for the same gear is a move in the wrong direction for preventing entanglements. Number 2, it will cause significant environmental disaster for ghost gear because it is not possible to harvest in the depths of water with this weakened rope. Ghost gear is difficult to remove and preventing it must be the priority. More ghost gear will further increase likelihood of entangling marine mammals and other species. This directly conflicts with DFO's Ghost Gear Fund goals. Since its launch in 2019, government has invested $16.7 million in the program, and as a participant, FFAW has removed 16 tons of ghost gear from our waters. The very purpose of the program is to retrieve abandoned, lost, and discarded fishing gear and encourage marine sustainability. Thirdly, serious safety concerns due to lack of practical testing in our marine environment. DFO has provided no evidence that this gear is safe or effective for the fishery. They have provided no evidence that the gear has been fully tested and would hold up to North Atlantic tides, ice conditions, and heavy strains in deep water. In the absence of this evidence to show that gear can withstand these conditions, we can confidently say that a large amount of gear and rope will be deposited right back into the ocean. Harvesters in Newfoundland and Labrador are supportive of protecting whales, but can't support changes in management that are likely to do the exact opposite, including causing significant amounts of ghost scare, increasing cost to harvesters and their families, and creating safety concerns in an already extremely dangerous work environment. Thank you, and I look forward to the questions and conversation.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. We'll now go to Ms. Morse for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to present today. The Grand Manan Fishermen's Association represents independent owner-operator fishermen on Grand Manan and Whitehead Islands in the Bay of Fundy. Our approximately 200 members fish lobster, scallop, drownfish, and herring. The landed value of these fisheries averages over $75 million annually and is a major employer for our isolated community of 2,600 people. Charlotte County as a whole represents 30% of the provincial landings in New Brunswick, and 1 in 5 jobs in this county are in the seafood sector. There were just over 400 fishing companies in the county in the 216 census, and almost half of those were based on Grand Manan and Whitehead Islands. For generations, our fishermen have been coexisting with North Atlantic right whales. We have worked collaboratively with researchers, with and without government involvement, to do the right thing. Fishermen understand that right whales and all marine mammals have a place in the ecosystem, and a healthy ecosystem ensures their longevity as much as it does the animals that live there. We have taken measures that have provided real protection, but haven't always been quantifiable in a government report. Fishermen believed in the process and actively engaged and participated. Our biggest asset is the timing of our lobster fishery. Our lobster season opens next month in November, and it runs till the end of June. The recovery strategy for North Atlantic right whales states that the Grand Manan Basin is critical habitat, but only in late summer and early fall. So if there is any overlap, it's relatively minimal. In 2018, the Department of Fisheries and Oceans arbitrarily closed a portion of our lobster district after a single sighting of a single right whale in June. Local fishermen and scientists have long understood that a single sighting early in spring does not necessarily herald the arrival of right whales into the bay. With rare exceptions, a single right whale will arrive in the bay seeming to scout for food. Unless there is feed, it quickly moves on. We believe that 10-day closure cost our community over $1 million in landings. While there is a monetary cost, there was also a social cost. There is now reluctance by fishermen to report any sighting of any whale for fear of the repercussions. After the closure, the GMFA submitted a pilot project to the department that essentially had a sliding scale of measures based on risk. Those measures reduced end lines, rope at the surface of the water, and included a section of weaker rope in the end lines. A single sighting of a single whale would result in measures to reduce rope, but would still allow continued fishing. Subsequent sightings would need additional measures. This project was used once since 2018 when a right whale was seen the week before our season, which only highlights how rarely our season overlaps with right whale presence. Despite that, this pilot project was canceled this winter because it was inconsistent with other measures. Heading into this season, we are faced with the uncertainty of potential closures. We are concerned because there is not scientific evidence to support a 15-day closure based on a single sighting. The impact of a closure, particularly in the fall, can be devastating. Lost fishing days cannot be recuperated as weather deteriorates and lobster movements reduce during colder weather. We know that during the time right whales are heading south and do not stay in the Bay of Fundy. We estimate that well over half of our landings happen in the first few weeks of the season. Not fishing because there is a single sighting of a transiting right whale is unbearable. Not fishing when there are no right whales because of an arbitrary measure is unacceptable. The economic hardship of these arbitrary measures are being borne by individuals in rural coastal communities like mine. Our membership is disenfranchised with the process, mainly because despite having an abundance of right whales in the Bay of Fundy up until the past decade, there has never been a known entanglement of a right whale in LFA 38 lobster gear. The plight of North Atlantic right whales is a real problem that needs real solutions, not only those that are easy to communicate. There is a vast difference in fisheries across Atlantic Canada. It is highly improbable that there is going to be any one cookie-cutter approach that will work for everyone. Solutions will only be found if there is a willingness to listen. Thank you.
Thank you for that. We'll now go to our rounds of questioning. I will remind members to direct their question to whoever they want to answer it. It'll make it easier and your time will be better used. We'll first go to Mr. Perkins for 6 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My first question, I guess, would be for Mr. Sullivan and Ms. Moores. In our first meeting for the study, which Mr. Cormier proposed that we do, officials were asked about how many entanglements over the last 5 years there were with lobster gear and crab gear recorded in Canadian waters, and the response was there was only one in crab gear, and that the largest category of cause of deaths of right whales in the waters, particularly in the 2-year period where there were 12 deaths, was undetermined since the necropsies, the whales were too decomposed. So I'm curious, I'll start with Mr. Sullivan first. You say that you don't see right whales that much during fishing season. And as a result, I suspect also you've been dealing with fishermen who have been experimenting with the weak rope, the breakable rope. Can you share with me what the results of that are from your experience of the fishermen, Mr. Sullivan, who have been testing that gear?
Well, I guess I'll start off and say that, you know, the conversation and the consultation with those in Newfoundland and Labrador has been minimal. You know, this was a real active problem for those fishing in other areas previously, certainly the Bay of Fundy and the Gulf of St. Lawrence, but we hadn't had these sightings, and I don't really believe the effort is done by DFO to engage in Newfoundland and Labrador. And it was obvious that weak rope in some of our fisheries was completely asinine and, unsafe. It was clearly not an option, and it would lead to more problems. So there was huge reluctance to engage in some of this work, and there was no engagement by DFO to really solve the problem. But the information I have on initial testing, particularly around crab gear, which I suppose we'd be more concerned about due to water depths, it has, predictably not worked very well, generally speaking. And I would say deeper waters in Newfoundland and Labrador, we can expect that to be probably worse than most of the areas that have been tested. So I'll leave it there and give time for others.
I have to interrupt you, Mr. Perkins. I know you're not here in the room, but the lights are flashing that a vote has been called. But I would ask the committee if we have permission to continue, and maybe when there's between 10 and 5 minutes left, if we're all in agreement, we'll use our devices to vote instead of leaving room. But we'll continue on for another 15 or so minutes a testimony, and I'll stop it when I think we need that much time to sign in and get our faces identified on our cameras. Right. Continue, Mr. Perkins, please.
Thank you. The experience of fishermen this summer, lobster fishermen that I spoke with in LFA 34, testing the gear in the summer, the weak rope, which of course is not when we fish in LFA 34, it's in the winter, was that almost all of it broke in hauling traps. So it caused a lot of ghost gear and doesn't actually work that well, let alone in difficult winter situations. So Monsieur Letang and Monsieur Noel, you spoke of your experience there where you seem to say it worked. Can you speak to that and also speak to the cost of or have you been mainly experimenting with the ropeless gear? And if that's the case, what is the cost of that gear?
Merci pour la question.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman. The question was on the ropeless gear we've been testing for some 3 years now. The new technology uses acoustics, and the cost is about $5,000 per unit. Fishers who did the tests had 5 units on board, so just the units cost $25,000. The crab fishing attachment was, the crab fishing trap was attached to the unit. So a series of crab cages were attached to a single unit. This was a learning experience because we were developing new fishing techniques, but the costs are much higher than with the traditional fishing. But what it does mean is that we can go fishing in areas where we otherwise could not, because it allows the right whale to be protected.
Thank you. If I could do one quick follow-up. I believe before the 2018 changes were made in the Gulf, the crab fishery was, I think, starting in May, and one of the government policies was, well, allow you to start the season earlier, sending boats out into icier waters, and there was a commitment made by DFO at the time that the Coast Guard would always be present. My understanding the last couple of years, the Coast Guard hasn't actually always been present when the crab season's been launched in the Gulf during a very icy season. Is that correct?
I will answer that question. I will answer it in English for you, sir.
Thank you.
The what has been going on before 18. Coast Guard was always there with icebreakers to free up ports, mainly to make the fishery zone accessible. The fact that the presence of the right whales, the fact is what it did is try to fish as early as possible before the right whales arrive, placing extra pressure, a lot of pressure actually, on everybody in the industry, starting for the Coast Guard to try to clear off channels and to make sure that those fishing territory becomes accessible. I would say there's a difference between having protection on the water and having the channel cleared. So Coast Guard, as you know, have some equipment in different locations within the Gulf to make sure that we have a safe fishery. And it is possible that in some fishing season, it did arrive that Coast Guard were not necessarily available at each location. But I would add, with this opening committee that we do have, everybody's at the table, and I can assure you that every effort is made by everybody, and especially DFO and Coast Guard, to make sure that we do have a safe fishery.
Thank you,
so
Mr.
that's
Latane.
why we do say that we want to
Mr.
maintain
Latane,
that committee.
Time has gone way over, and the allotted time for Mr. Perkins. We'll now go to Mr. Cormier for 6 minutes or less, please.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. 6 minutes goes quickly. I'd like to congratulate you all for the tremendous efforts you've made since 2017 to protect the right whale. In spite of what some environmental groups think, you are setting the example, and I think you should be known around the world for your efforts. Mr. Latane, Mr. Noël, I'll talk about safety in a moment, but I'll come back to what Mr. Perkins said. Mr. Noël or Mr. Latane, this question is for you. In the past 5 years, and I believe that in the past 2 years, our colleagues have seen the map of the Gulf being pretty much closed between late May onwards. DFO says yes, but the whole quota, or at least over 90% of the quota, gets fished. You talked about safety, and it's very important. In the dynamic closure zones, does that system work? And in your view, can those closures be amended in dynamic zones to make some areas more accessible and at the same time ensure that safety remains paramount? Yes, we want to save the right whale, but we all know that moving and traps, there have been incidents. So what changes have been made? What are your options and comments? Yes, there is a way of improving the closure measures. There are two kinds of dynamic closures. When whales are seen, there's a temporary closure. If you see another whale whale between 9 and 10 days afterwards, then the shutdown is for the whole season. When, in May, the whales arrive in the Gulf of St. Lawrence, at that point there's still a transition period. The model we're using doesn't capture the feeding zones. There's a shutdown as soon as the whales are observed. But if the whale is just moving through the region and on the next day, it might be elsewhere, but there's been a seasonal closure, so there'll be no fishing there for the rest of the season. And this could be a very productive area with no whales in it at all. So the model can be adjusted to capture this phenomenon. Well, do you think that the acoustic buoys, the flights that are used to detect whales, if the acoustic buoys detect whales at a radius of 40 kilometers or so, the zone is closed, and that system, the buoys and the planes, could be used to track the whales and to decide whether the zone will be closed or remain open. Could that not be done? Yes, absolutely. I agree. Acoustic buoys are not perfect. Neither is visual observation from a plane. For a zone to reopen, there has to be enough time since the last sighting. 2 flights need to have seen a clear field. But the acoustic buoys remain in place, and they can detect whales in the region. So acoustic buoys are used to shut down the zone, but not to reopen it. They could be used for both. So what you're saying is that you'd like the technology, the acoustic buoy technology, to be used for closure and reopening. So you think the system would be more flexible and would not jeopardize the whale's protection? One whale going through the zone but not staying there should not shut down a zone for a season. There has to be aggregation, more than one whale who are either socializing or feeding in a given zone. To my mind, that would trigger a reasonable and applicable seasonal closure of the zone. Mr. Lantagne, you then talked about reopening, and I'll come back to this later if I may. When the season opens, do you think that the season should open everywhere for everyone at the same time, be it Quebec, New Brunswick, and Nova Scotia? And if it didn't open at the same time, how would that affect the opening of the fishery? Well, it's very clear to us that the fishing season should start for everyone at the same time. The best example is comparing it to a field of blueberries. If you don't do that, you've privileged some fishers over others. Yes, Zone 12 is big. Yes, the area looks huge if you don't know the field. But it depends on where the crabs and resources are concentrated. It can be very different. Every fisher knows his or her fishing territories. So if we don't start everybody off at the same time, there'll be a social war which won't be pretty. Secondly, a social war among fishers. If the season starts on a fixed date, then you really risk putting lives in danger. If something opens on a set date, fishers will have to go fish, even if the conditions aren't safe.
We'll now go to Madame Desbiens for 6 minutes or less, please.
Ms. Desbiens. Mr. Cormier, I'll offer you half of my time. Will you start, or shall I go on? If the chairman allows, you can continue. Well, that's very kind. I wasn't expecting that. Thank you very much. Mr. Lantagne. So, if the season were to start earlier, Mr. Perkins was talking about the Coast Guard, which has been around or present since for a few years, but there have always been some problems, as you know, because at the last minute, either bids don't come in, Coast Guard vessels cannot come where they need to be because they're too large. There have been extraordinary efforts made with the Groupe Océan in Quebec, but sometimes the ice is thicker. So we do everything we can, but don't you think it's time to give the region its own mini icebreaker that could be used to break ice? In New Brunswick, we know that Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, PEI loses ice more quickly. It melts more quickly. Do you think this additional device would help us start the season along with everybody else while protecting the whales? We'd have all the tools we needed. Yes, I completely agree. This is something we would be ready to support because really we are the lowest priority for the Coast Guard because the Coast Guard's top priority is the protection of people, citizens. The fishery doesn't have the same priority ranking, and the ice could be broken sooner because the Coast Guard's efforts are focused elsewhere. So this would be a very good solution. We could equip our fishing ports to get the ice broken. I'm not seeing this as an attack on the other provinces at all. It's just a question of finding solutions that would enable everybody to start at the same time. What I fear is that if the season begins earlier for some provinces, this will affect the economy of all our coastal regions because fishers might head fishers from one province could head elsewhere. Ms. Desbois, thank you so much, and I yield back. Thank you, Mr. Cormier. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll stay with Mr. Noel. I'm very interested by your acoustic buoy that can trigger the closure of a given zone, but not its reopening. Is there anything that could be done to modernize this device so that it can be used reliably to signal that something could reopen, a zone could reopen? Yes, there is work underway that perhaps hasn't been published yet, but with the use of a number of acoustic buoys, if a number of acoustic buoys were properly placed, it would be difficult. It would be possible, rather, to determine where a whale is and whether a zone could effectively be reopened. I think, however, the work will take some time. Acoustic technology has been around for a long time, but it hasn't made the progress needed to reliably deliver this kind of information. I do think the Canadian government could encourage this technology to be explored so that our fishers could have access to productive territories. Is it because of lack of funding? Would funding help research R&D move along faster? Or is it just that the technology takes time? Some fishers have been saying they've been on the moon. They reached the moon 60 years ago, but they can't track a right whale. Well, there is a question of funding, but I did say we thank the federal government for their financial assistance because it's extremely helpful. This research is essential, and would more funding help? It could certainly perhaps move R&D along faster.
Thank you for that. Now we'll go to Ms. Barron for 6 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you to the witnesses who are here today. I have my first questions are for Mr. Sullivan. Mr. Sullivan, you had spoken about in your testimony today about the lack of meaningful consultation that occurred with harvesters in Newfoundland and Labrador by DFO and a refusal to acknowledge input from experienced, knowledgeable harvesters. And I'm wondering if you could expand and share a little bit more around what you think proper consultation, what you're hearing from other fishers and harvesters, of course, what that proper consultation would look like.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for the question. And I think, like I had said before, is that the evolution of this problem is different in Newfoundland and Labrador. It wouldn't be something that anyone had a high level of awareness about. And when this was kind of pitched, I guess, first, it seemed like a cookie cutter solution for fish harvesters here, and said, well, I mean, that option is just not realistic. It cannot work. It's not about necessarily testing weak rope or weak links. It's just physics, and harvesters knew very clearly that 1,700 pounds was way too little for the gear we're using. And the gear that we're actually using does very good at avoiding marine mammals. So there was absolutely no engagement or no interest from the Department of Fisheries and Oceans to find other ways and work with harvesters in local areas to solve these problems. It was just one that was perhaps worked somewhere else or came from Ottawa and said, here you go, please adapt no matter what, if it's realistic or not. And I once kind of described, they're saying, well, you should just test it out first. And it was kind of like, yeah, give you a cardboard box and say, go to the moon. You say, oh, well, that's not possible. But try it first anyway. Try it first. It wasn't reasonable approach. So I think the way we fish with very little vertical lines already in the water for these, like I said, fleets of crab gear, which would be primarily the concern. I mean, we can look at ways to make that the norm, and doing some of the other things that DFO were suggesting is just compounding the problems, having more entanglement of marine mammals. And I referenced, a whale man who dedicated his life to rescuing and conservation of whales, perhaps more than anyone else in Newfoundland and Labrador. And when someone in that position really highlights the problems with DFO's approach and says, this is, I'm going to paraphrase, say that it's absurd, I think we have a problem with the approach, and it's time to start listening to experts like Mr. Ledwell, and certainly I would say the harvesters themselves.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Building off of some of your comments that you just made, you had also mentioned about the proposed solutions that are being put forward significantly being more likely to lead to increased entanglements. Now, I'm not a fisher, and so perhaps you can explain a little bit more about how the proposed solutions are resulting in the example that you used of 20 vertical lines for the same gear rather than 2. Could you explain a little bit more what that looks like and how it would increase the amount of lines?
Yeah, so the way we fish now, just say in a given example, a harvester would fish 70 different traps in a line with 2 vertical ropes on the end. If you're forced to put on these weak ropes and ropes with breaking strength, you would have to say, okay, you'll have 7 traps in a line, which won't actually fish very well because the gear it's too light. You'd have to add safety risks, but then what that would mean, you'll have 20 vertical lines in the water, and if you don't do that, you'll bust off this gear. You'll have all kinds of ghost gear, tangles of rope and gear on the bottom, ghost fishing, and also more likely to entangle marine mammals. In our waters is not likely going to be right whales, probably other marine mammals or other species that we want to protect as well. So, I mean, it's kind of this ecosystem approach and deal with people with practical solutions is really what we need, not implement ones that are going to cause us way more problems, including hurting other species, including whales, and certainly causing safety issues for harvesters.
Thank you. You also spoke about the 16 tons of ghost scare that have been retrieved by FFAW from the waters in the past 2 years. It's an incredible amount of ghost scare that's been retrieved. I wanted to offer an opportunity to perhaps speak to that a little bit further, what that's looked like, and how to continue the retrieval of that ghost scare with the systems and processes that are being taken by fishers and harvesters.
Yep. So, certainly when federal government came out with this program, it was definitely given a lot of credit from harvesters. People wanted to see some of this ghost scare retrieval. But as I said, it is very difficult to retrieve this gear. It takes time. It's tough work. You got messes of gear on the bottom, and we hope to continue that work. But at the same time, the best thing we can do around ghost scare is not to retrieve it, is prevent it from laying on the bottom and going in the water. And that's why it's so frustrating and seems so senseless that we can't have an engagement on how to avoid that. And it seems like, that's been the threat. Put the fish harvesters who really want to avoid that for obvious reasons, and we're going to implement something that is going to guarantee us have more ghost scare on the bottom. And I mean, there's not a budget big enough that can really collect all that gear in some of these harsh environments. And I will say a lot of this gear is collected certainly closer to shore and in shallower water depths and everything as well. So it's tough to retrieve this gear. Prevention has to be the number one priority when it comes to ghost scare in our waters.
That concludes your 6 minutes. I know we've got like almost 4 minutes left before the vote starts, a 10-minute countdown. So with permission of the committee, we can go on for another 5 minutes question and then take the break, recess a little bit to do the actual voting. And when everybody does the vote, if everyone could let me know when everybody has it done, we'll come back right away. Okay, so Mr. Arnold, to you for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses. I'll start right in just by thanking everyone for doing what they can to protect the right whales. But I want to start off with questions to probably Ms. Morris and Mr. Noel regarding the overflights and the acoustic listening devices. Has anybody provided you with any information as to the cost differences or the cost of these flights? To me, it would seem that the cost of flights and manning those flights would be far greater than more acoustic listening devices. Can you provide, if you have any information on that? Ms. Morris?
Certainly. Thank you for the question. I don't have any information on what the cost of the flights are. I will say in the Bay of Fundy, though, because we have such an active tidal waters, that acoustic devices just aren't functional here. So really the only way to do monitoring here in the Bay of Fundy is by flights.
Merci pour la question, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you for the question. I don't know the exact cost of what it takes for the frequent flights from DFO, Conservation and Protection, but there's certainly a cost difference between acoustic buoys and flights. However, each of the two has pros and cons. The difference is that planes, when they identify a whale, they can really say precisely where that whale is, so we know very specifically what zone has to be closed. With an acoustic buoy, it can detect whales at a greater distance, but we don't know the exact direction and distance of that whale from the acoustic buoy. So that is a weakness of the acoustic buoys. The flights are more precise. Thank you.
It was a good segue into my next question. On the West Coast, the killer whales there can basically be identified by markings, individual markings. Individual whales can be identified, making it perhaps a little bit easier to track their movements and their direction of movement. Is that possible to identify right whales, or are they much more difficult to identify individually?
Merci pour la question, Monsieur.
Thank you for the question. Right whales have distinctive markings on their heads known as, they're callus areas. They don't have those marks when they're young. They acquire them when they get older, and along with scars, those patterns make it very easy to identify a whale, but they're not always visible from a flight. There are certainly distinctive markings that can help identify individual right whales.
Sullivan, what gear or management options would be suggested by your organization or proposed in Newfoundland, Labrador? You're saying that the DFO proposals aren't workable. Do you have any ideas or proposals that your organization or harvesters would put forward?
Yeah, well, first of all, absolutely, we'll encourage the continued monitoring of the right whales there, and we would be subject to closures, for example, if you see a number of whales. So that'd be some things that would be considered. But in the meantime, I think you can do it with management, less opportunity for entanglements there. And I think the gear configurations in crab is something that can be looked at. Fishing, reducing the number of these vertical lines in the water. That is a very workable, sensible solution, as opposed to increasing the numbers there. And I think that's exactly what those who've dealt with marine mammal entanglements in the areas before would suggest that make sense as well. Because right now you see, weak rope, for example, might be something that can help disentangle a whale, but again, it's like the ghost scare. It's better to prevent a whale from getting entangled as opposed to putting more rope into the water and having more entanglements and hoping to get them out of the rope and the fishing gear. So I think there are a couple of things we can certainly do, and we can learn more from our counterparts in the other parts of the Gulf and the Bay of Fundy and other areas have dealt with them for longer. And Mr. Noel spoke about some of this on-demand gear. I think it'll take time when you talk about $5,000 per piece of equipment. Obviously, that's a difficult transition for people, but I believe that may be something that once we get more trials, testing, and confidence in, may be a part of the solution.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Arnold. I think we'll take a quick recess now to allow members to vote, and we'll ask for the witnesses to be patient for a few minutes till we get this process done, and we'll be right back very shortly. Recess. or less, please. Mr. Cormier, 5 minutes or less.
Oh, sorry. Je ne sais pas si tous les témoins sont là.
I don't know whether all the witnesses are there. Yes, there they are. So just to finish with the ice breaking, I'm very happy with the efforts that have been made, but there's a lot of bureaucracy, there's a lot of paperwork, and we know that we need vessels to get this done. So we need to eliminate the red tape that's preventing people from getting the vessels they need. Mr. Lantagne, Mr. Noël, there are discussions that took place in 2000 that are going to take place on the kind of rope or ropeless gear that's going to be used. We have talked with DFO because there's a lot of concern that the ropes will be more harmful than helpful to the right whale. What is your view? Thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman. I had said recently that weak rope is a problem. If discussions at the department are to continue in December or November, that would lead perhaps to changes to the regulations by January or February. What I fear is that there'll be more ghost gear in the sea, and that will be a danger to the right whales even when there are no fishers around. So I think there's a lot of work to be done. We've done some trials, but we're still at the first stage. There are still 2 or 3 stages that we need to go through until we see whether this new technology would be useful. So do you think it would be best to wait a bit, since we can't yet understand or not in a position to know if the new kinds of ropes will be useful and safe? Well, more flexibility would be useful, so we could really measure the effects of the rope. Now, crabbers are large boats, so the breaking point seems to be insufficient for some of the rope. And if we use these ropes with equipment that isn't being used broadly, I think it's a combination of factors that could be risky. Mr. Lantagne, we talked about measures that dictate the closure or reopening of certain zones. Do you believe that there is still some flexibility that could be brought in? Could we improve flexibility without an impact on the U.S. or international market? Do you think we could have more flexible measures while protecting the safety of fishers without there being so much chaos between the beginning and end of the season, having processing plants that don't have to produce or process so quickly so that everybody can, how can I put it, breathe, and have the U.S. recognize that our measures are as good, if not better, than theirs? Yes, there is room for improvement. The 9 zones we close are huge. They're very large areas. We have proposed measures to TFO. Those were rejected. To grid those to give safe access, safe for the whale, that is, access to fishers to some parts of those areas. Now, the more we concentrate the fishery on areas outside the closed zones, it actually becomes dangerous for the whale because there's a higher concentration of gear in a smaller area. And there are also fishers that have to move equipment quickly. So yes, there is more room for flexibility. We need to continue fine-tuning how to close these zones. They need to be smaller zones and closed for less time, especially when the whales are transitioning through them. We use acoustic buoys to shut these zones down, and we use only visual cues to reopen them.
We'll now go to Madame Debienne for 2.5 minutes, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Moi, je vais pas prendre...
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will take my full 2.5 minutes, but I'll stay with Mr. Lontagne. Your opening committee, the one you were talking about, that focuses on how to open zones, would that provide a short-term option? Mr. Noel was saying that January 2023 is not a viable date for the new instruments. Could the opening committee ask for a longer deadline by which the new DFO solutions would be applied? So could this committee be set up quickly? My second question, could it have someone representing the U.S. market? Could there be someone representing the U.S. market on the committee? Well, the committee is already set up, and it has been in place for some years now. What the committee does is set an ideal date where the fishing zone is free of ice and decides whether the fishery can safely open. All fishers associations, processors, ocean fishing organizations, Coast Guard, because we know that the date we don't want that to fall when there's a storm. The First Nations, everybody is at the table, is on the committee. The date changes from one year to the next, depending on weather and the condition or presence of ice. But what's happening is that provincial associations want to set firm dates without taking all these variables into account, like weather and presence of ice, and we think that's dangerous. And this is like the Kaplan issue. I think you know exactly what you're saying. I've heard you discussing that. My second question is this. In order to increase our environmental credit, as it were, in the U.S. market, is there a representative from the U.S. market on the committee, or could someone work with it? No, they don't have a presence on the committee because this is a Canadian committee, and we believe that we need to exercise our power, and we do that very well. However, if you're asking whether the U.S. looks at our work carefully, yes, they do. They watch what we do very carefully, especially on this issue, and they do appreciate the work, the efforts we make to start the season as quickly as possible so that we avoid fishing when the right whales are there. The U.S. market tracks what we do very closely. First of all, they want to know when they will be getting fresh stocks. And secondly, they track our work to ensure that we minimize the impact on right whales.
And off this portion for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. My question is for Madame Morse. Madame Morse, you had spoken about the socioeconomic impacts on communities as a result of the closures, and this is something that I wanted to hear from you a little bit more around what you were hearing from community members around the impacts, and some thoughts around how we move forward in conservation efforts and protecting the North Atlantic right whale while also ensuring that we are considering the socioeconomic impacts on communities?
Sure. Thank you for the question. Obviously, living on an island, we're very isolated, and our economy is completely dependent on the sea, whether it's the fishing or the aquaculture industry. Lobsters are a primary fishery that we have, so anything that happens to that has a huge impact on the island as a whole. I think for us, one of the big things is particularly coming into the beginning of the season, because our season starts in November, it's when right whales are leaving Canadian waters. So you wouldn't tend to see them coming into the Bay of Fundy and lingering in the area and looking for feed. If they do, they're very much a transitory trip through the Bay of Fundy. So I think some of the things that my colleagues have talked about a single whale transiting, shutting down large pieces of the fishery for an extended period of time when really the whales aren't there anymore. I think we need to look at the duration of the closures and maybe a multiple sighting of whales if we are going to have a longer term closure such as that. I think that we also have to look at some of the risk factors when we're looking at some of the measures like Mr. Sullivan has talked about. If you have an area where the fishery takes place where there's very little or no overlap with right whale presence, maybe we don't need to focus as much on the measures those places, but work more collaboratively with fish harvesters who I think do have different solutions. But what works in the Bay of Fundy with our tides probably isn't going to work in the Gulf of St. Lawrence any more than what works for the Gulf of St. Lawrence is going to work in Newfoundland. I think we have to move away from having a unilateral approach that will work Atlantic Canada wide and really look at specific areas to see how the fishery operates there and what can be done in those areas and what needs to be done.
Thank you, Ms. Barron. I'm going to break the rule a little bit, and because Mr. Small is such a nice guy, I'm going to allow him one question and be quick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And my question is to Monsieur Noel. And I know in Newfoundland and Labrador, crab fishing is carried out, as Mr. Sullivan stated earlier, with 70 pots in a string, 2 haul-ups. In your area, in the Gulf there, are you fishing with pots on strings, or are you using single pot with each pot with a vertical rope? If so, do you think that switching to Japanese-style crab pots, such as we use in Newfoundland and Labrador, would reduce the chances of right whales being entangled in vertical lines or haul-ups? Don't you think that would very positively impact what we're trying to do here?
Merci pour la question, Monsieur le Président. Ici, dans le Golfe, nous pêchons avec des trappes avec une bouée, un cordage et un casier.
We are using gear with rope. We are using Japanese traps on trawls or on lines, given that there's a larger density of units that does concentrate the amount in a given area, and that makes conditions less safe for our fishers. I spoke with fishers in Newfoundland who have sometimes up to 70 traps lined up. It's safer to have a lower concentration than that. But when we use ropeless gear, we are on 10 trap trawls, and that does make it better.
Thank you, Mr. Small. I'd like to say a big thank you, of course, to Mr. Noel, Mr. Latang, and Mr. Sullivan for your time here, and Ms. Morse for your time here this evening with the committee. We're going to take a very short recess to get the other witnesses set up, and I understand all of them have done a sound check except for one, so we won't be in break mode very long. So again, thank you for your time. Greatly appreciated. Enjoy the rest of your day. We're recess for a moment. of witnesses representing the Fisheries Council of Canada. We have with us Mr. Paul Landsbergen, President. Representing the Prince Edward Island Fishermen's Association, we are joined by Molly Aylward, Executive Director, and Melanie Griffin, Marine Biologist and Industry Programme Planner. And representing the Cape Breton Fish Harvesters Association, we have Mr. Michael Barron, President. Thank you for taking the time to be with us today. You will each have up to 5 minutes for an opening statement, and I will invite Mr. Landsbergen to begin for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the invitation to appear before you today. As many of you know, the Fisheries Council of Canada is the national trade association representing wild capture processors across the country, and all of whom also harvest. We promote a healthy resource and a prosperous industry, playing a vital role in the Canadian economy. I would like to start by sharing some important facts of the sector that are often overlooked or underappreciated. Canada has a strong sustainability record. DFO reports that 98% of our commercial fish stocks are harvested at sustainable levels. And in addition, Canada is second in the world in the adoption of Marine Stewardship Council, or MSC, and an independent third-party sustainable fisheries management certification. On the economic side, it is the leading sector of Canada's blue economy with 90,000 jobs and $9 billion in annual GDP. It is the lifeblood of coastal communities. For the discussion today, I have a number of key messages for you. One is that no one wants to endanger whales. I mean, this should be obvious, but I feel like it needs to be said. They are majestic creatures, and none of us wants to harm them. Also, no one wants to lose gear, and this should be obvious, but when we know that lost gear can contribute to entanglement risk and more. Gear is marked, it's reported when lost, and there are incentives, as you heard from previous witnesses, for harvesters to retrieve gear. Indeed, the whales are endangered, and Canada does have legal obligations to act. You heard from DFO officials that they have to act under the Species at Risk Act. And we also need to be concerned about market implications under the US MMPA, which you're also familiar with, and I'll get back to that in a moment. Dynamic closures are an effective approach. And as you heard, they might not be perfect, but DFO continues to learn from 1 year to the next. And we certainly have learned a lot from the first year of static closures. You have heard from other witnesses, including those today, that are more intimately engaged in discussions with DFO on those closures and approaches. I will just add my voice to the chorus that the dynamic approach is much better than more static approaches taken elsewhere. And I encourage DFO to continue to discuss with industry learnings from 1 year to the next. In terms of market access and market acceptance, we do have to be cognizant of expectations of foreign governments and customers. The US market is our top export market last year to the tune of $6.2 billion, or 70% of our seafood exports. Of this, lobster was $2.2 billion, and crab, mostly snow crab, was $1.9 billion, for a total of $4.1 billion. And we'll learn as early as next month how the US government evaluated our fisheries under the MMPA, and I'm confident that we will have good comparability findings. Reactions can also impact our overall market reputation and beyond those fisheries directly affected. And unfortunately, reality is we do have to respond to organizations that criticize us. It is even more frustrating when they are not transparent or robust in their determinations. But it's critical that the industry speaks up for itself, and we have. FCC, as the national voice, has been increasingly proactive to build public trust for the sector and is also here to respond to criticisms after the fact. We also expect that when questions are posed of how DFO is managing our resources, that it defends itself and the industry. And I think DFO could do better in this respect. We can't forget that DFO makes the rules, and when we are criticized, it impacts them too. Lastly, we expect MSC to defend itself and the industry, and I'm pleased that they have and continue to do this. In closing, I want to note that the lobster and snow crab sectors are innovating at an unprecedented pace. The supports from government are also helping in this respect. And I hope that in only a few short years, the entanglement risk will be virtually eliminated by the widespread adoption of innovative gear. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Landsbergen. We'll now go to either Ms. Aylward or Ms. Giffen. I don't know if you're sharing your time or if only one of you are giving a statement. You have 5 minutes either for one or between you, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be making the statement today. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee for the invitation to speak here today. The PEI Fishermen's Association was created in the 1950s and has evolved alongside the Department of Fisheries and Oceans to create a well-established working relationship we currently maintain. Our goal in being here today is to focus on North Atlantic right whales management measures as they relate to Prince Edward Island and how they can be adapted to ensure successful fishery while also impeding the growth of not impeding, the growth of the North Atlantic right whale population. Before focusing on measures that affect PEI specifically, we feel it's important to point out an overall challenge with the process to date. Since 2017, when the mass mortality triggered meetings to discuss management changes, we feel that there has been a lack of meaningful consultation with harvesters. There have been advisory committee meetings and gear summits, but there have been very few harvesters invited to take part. The gatherings have felt like an opportunity for DFO to check a box, while concerns and recommendations voiced during those meetings appear to have fallen on deaf ears. It is the harvesters who are key to a successful solution, so considerable time should be invested by DFO to talk to fishers in every LFA to determine what will and won't work in that area. The first time DFO met with PEI harvesters was in August of 2022, 5 years after discussion started. There is still opportunity for DFO to be more focused on meaningful consultation with harvesters. Moving on to current measures related to Prince Edward Island. 1, mandatory requirement for weak link and whale safe gear. The PEIFA understands the goal of this management measure. Unfortunately, there is a lack of information being shared from DFO to harvesters regarding the details. Harvesters need time to modify their gear, and January 1st, 2023 is fast approaching. PEI harvesters normally prep rope a year in advance of the season. Harvesters would like to avoid a situation like gear marking, which was announced only 1 month prior to the season and left everyone to scramble to find the twine and modify their gear. Major changes like this result in procurement issues, slowing the process even more. The PEIFA still have the following unanswered questions. 1, when will DFO present a list of approved gear? And 2, where does the weak link need to be installed on the vertical line? Number 2, seasonal closures. Currently, Transport Canada is discussing changing the restricted zone near Shediac Valley. Based on 2022 whale sightings, there is also discussion of making the restricted zone adaptable so it can be changed throughout the season if necessary. The PEIFA feels DFO could consider the same adaptability in relation to the seasonal closures. The first seasonal closure in 2022 was announced around May 19th, leaving the grid closed until November 15th, almost 6 months. Adaptability could be built into this management measure to review the area monthly and determine if reopening the grid would be high or low risk. If the risk is low and reopening the grid gives fishers more ground, then it should be a discussion on the table. Currently, there is no discussion about reopening once a grid is closed for the season. Number 3, 20 to 10 fathom line exclusion lines. This management measure points to the lower risk of interaction in shallow depths and is also an example of a measure that balances protecting the whales while allowing fishers to access rich fishing grounds. A recommendation from the PEIFA for management measure regarding fishing depths versus whale sightings. In PEI, lobster harvesters fish in depths that range from 4 to 130 feet. It is obvious that North Atlantic right whales are not sighted in 4 feet of water, and therefore management measures being forced on fishers in these areas are not effective in protecting whales, but they do create additional work and risk of lost gear to fishers. This could be solved with an exclusion zone based on the science of the minimum depth North Atlantic right whales are sighted. As an example, if the 10 fathom line was the the exclusion line, it would save about 99% of island fishers some time and money in the preparation of their gear without increasing the risk to North Atlantic right whales. These numbers are extrapolated from 503 surveys completed with island fishers on gear configuration through the Whale Safe Gear Fund. The PEIFA has been working diligently on this file over the years. We take part in the following committees and advisories: DFO Technical Working Group, DFO Advisory Committee, North Atlantic Right Whale and Ropeless Consortium, Transport Canada Small Vessel Technical Working Group Committee, the Canadian Wildlife Federation, North Atlantic Right Whale Stakeholder Meeting. We then disseminate the information gathered to PEI fishers through advisory and board meetings on PEI. The PEIFA are also working with harvesters to determine whale safe gear that will work for PEI. This work started prior to the Whale Safe Gear Fund, but trials expanded through the Whale Safe Gear Fund while additionally collecting data on gear configuration. We hope to use gear configuration information to ensure management measures are efficient for PEI. Harvesters also do their part to find efficient methods to remove ghost gear and to remove lost gear before it becomes ghost gear. Again, some of this work has been ongoing on PEI prior to the Ghost Gear Fund, but the work has been expanded with the help of this fund. The PEIFA are aware that this is a complex issue. We want to work with DFO to find solutions, but we are also feeling there are missed opportunities for DFO to listen to concerns raised by fishers and discuss possible solutions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We'll now go to Mr. Barron for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, honourable members of Parliament. It is an honour to be here today to present to you on the North Atlantic Right Whale. My name is Michael Barron. I'm the president of the Cape Breton Fish Harvesters Association, also an independent owner-operator of a fishing, lobster, and snow crab enterprise in a small coastal community in northern Cape Breton. As an industry, we're in a difficult place, being at the forefront of the economic and social change that accompanies reconciliation and now having to deal with the right whale crisis. I would like to stress that as an industry, we take great pride in being stewards of the ocean. Our industry would simply not exist if conservation and sustainability was not central to everything we do. We take great pride in the sustainability of our industry, but we often feel our expertise is overlooked or dismissed when it comes to the decisions that are being made around potential new policies and timelines for implementation. I really want to stress that we need to be more mindful that science, evidence, and clear transport risk assessments need to be in the forefront of DFO policy and regulatory decisions, and not sensationalism and misinformation. We don't have to look very far to the recent Monterey Bay Aquarium report, which erroneously listed lobster and snow crab in the red zone, to the effect a non-evidence-based report can have on an entire industry. Although this is just an NGO report with no real factual or transparent scientific data, it garnered a significant media attention and caused great concern amongst the industry. It is also concerning that the government took so long to make a public address in support of the industry to acknowledge what we have done to try to prevent the right whale entanglement. I do understand the report was released around the same time in the mourning period of Her Majesty's death, and the mourning was for 7 days. Let me be clear, there have been no reported North Atlantic right whale entanglements linked to Canadian lobster fishing gear in recent years, including since 2017, when Canada enhanced protection measures for right whales. We were glad to see the ministers communicate these facts, and I hope that her department leans on our expertise instead of overlooking or dismissing our opinions, as they often do when making decisions on the future of our industry. However, I'm not overly hopeful given the fact we are currently being rushed into costly potential unsafe gear modifications which lack a proven track record of success. Similar to other associations, our association is testing whale safe gear. We actually have one member that is testing ropeless gear, which is a term that is very unsettling to me, as we do need rope to retrieve our gear. I prefer the term end lines on demand. Nonetheless, we are not having much success at this point, which is scary given that we may be forced into an April 1st of 2023 gear change implementation timeline. This causes us great concern because this is only a few months away, giving fishers little time to make the appropriate changes, not to mention the potential new products could see in short supply as suppliers will not have enough stock on hand. This rush timeline concerns industry as well from a practical perspective, but also a safety perspective as well. We are deeply concerned about using weaker rope or breakaway links when hauling our gear in an environment that is far from forgiving at times. This gear can part or break. Depending on when and where this happens, it becomes a huge safety issue. The parting of this gear would also create more ghost gear. Also, if this end-line on demand does in fact become implemented, it could lead to potential gear conflicts. If there is no identifiable marking at water surface, one fisher will be able to set over another fisher's gear, which may cause both end-line on demand units to fail and create even more ghost gear. I guess I must give DFO credit. They have created this ghost gear fund in lieu of the whale safe gear modifications that potentially will create a lot of ghost gear. Also, if this technology is implemented to fish within a closed area to do the North Atlantic right whale sighting, it will come at a great cost that only few within the industry will be able to afford, which in turn could be a huge economic loss to not only the harvester, but the coastal community in which they live, which also would mean less taxable income for the government. On top of this, global issues are impacting the price of our product at a time when the cost of everything is going up. We are not immune to these costs and pressures, and I hope that you can appreciate this is a vicious circle with no clear exit. Well, maybe there is one: bankruptcy. The seafood industry directly employs more than 10% of the people in my home county, Victoria County, Nova Scotia, and our industry is often praised that we generate approximately $2 billion of landed value to harvesters within Atlantic Canada, and $3.2 billion of the export value. Yet, we always seem to be on the defense when it comes to policy changes driven by persuasive public relation campaigns rather than science, evidence, and risk. As an industry, we pride ourselves in the sustainability, and yet we are forced to endlessly pivot while other entities that use our beautiful, pristine ocean do not seem to have to consistently be under the public eye. In closing, please understand, industry does not want to upset the balance of the ecosystems we fish in. We want the North Atlantic right whale to continue to live amongst us and their environment. We want to continue to provide pristine, sustainable protein to help with food security for our great country and around the world, and to provide economic revenue to our coastal communities. We just want to make sure that evidence, science, and industry expertise drives policy, and that we are given the appropriate time to adjust to practical and logical change. Thank you. I look forward to your questions.
We'll now proceed with the first round of questions. We'll first go to Mr. Perkins for 6 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses. My first question is to Ms. Alward. I was very much interested in your discussion about changing the permanent closure issue that PEI fishers are dealing with, in particular in the shallow depths. And I think it makes a lot of sense. In fact, as you may be aware, there was a closure in southwest Nova Scotia in June because of the sighting of a right whale, but FSC fishery was allowed to continue in that area. So I wrote to the minister on that, and the minister wrote me back on October 5th, and I'll quote from her letter. She said, "As you note, North American right whale closure protocols do not currently apply to FSC harvesting activities, which are rights-based, small scale, and they are small scale and often occur in shallow waters to which these whales are less likely to migrate." And I wouldn't mind tabling that letter with the committee just as part of the study. So the minister and the department are acknowledging that shallow water gear is not a threat to right whales and their response to my letter. So I wonder if you could briefly comment on that.
Sorry, thank you for your question. I'm going to defer the question to Melanie Giffen. She is the PEIFA marine biologist and also the lead on that file for us. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Yes, so basically here in PEI, we know that we fish in shallow waters compared to other areas. And we have the facts, some of the facts based on surveys that we've done, where fishers fish as shallow as 4 feet of water. And so, yes, you're absolutely right. You're not going to see a North Atlantic right whale within 4 feet of water. And so there are absolutely management measures that are out there currently that that show this. So the exclusion zones that already exist for closures with the 10 and 20 fathom line. So our request is an exclusion zone based on whale sightings that would actually exclude island fishers from requiring the weak links. Purely based on science and based on low risk areas, but it would save money and time for PEI harvesters who fish in those small areas.
Thank you, Ms. Giffen. Along the same lines, my next question is for Mr. Barron. It's sort of a follow-up, and I'm sure Ms. Giffen could probably comment too. But Mr. Barron, with the closures that you've experienced, you get a lot of, understand in the Cape Breton region, a lot of single whale sightings as they transit by to go to the Gulf. Can you tell me what the economic impact of those 15-day closures are when a whale is transiting by and has that one sighting?
Well, actually, we haven't had a closure here within our LFA 27. They've only happened on the other side of our LFA 27 line, which runs out of Bay St. Lawrence and borders the Gulf. So we're actually in a unique position because our lobster harvesters are within LFA 27, but their snow crab licenses are in Area 19 in the Gulf. So we have not experienced a closure here in our side of Cape Breton.
Thank you. Could you, as a follow-up, Mr. Barron, could you explain a little more about what your experience has been or your members' experience has been with the two types of experimental gear? It is good that they're experimenting, but my understanding is that it has a high failure rate on all accounts.
Yes, thank you very much for that. So as an association, we were able to get most of the weak gear out to our members this year, minus the breakaway links. We had sleeves and weak rope and a different type of sleeve. And with the unique way that our single trap fishery is, same as the PEIFA and other areas in the Gulf, I mean, we fish fairly shallow, jagged shoreline, which caused some of the gear not to be easy to haul. We ended up losing some due to chafing and stuff, depending on where we were instructed to try to see if this weak rope would work. And as for the end line on demand gear, the harvester we have testing it, he's actually tested 3 different versions. One is it requires two sets of rope. One you bundle up in a bag, and it's released automatically when you get close to it. He has had not much success with that, and he's had another one that requires an automatic coiling machine aboard, which is approximately $12,000 to the harvester to purchase the coiling machine, and $4,000 for each buoy. So, for example, in his snow crab fishery, he would have to have 24 buoys and a coiler, but if we ever had it seed in our lobster fishery, we'd have it 275 buoys and a $12,000 coiler. So economically, it does not make sense. Thank you.
Thank you. A quick last question to Mr. Landesbergen. The U.S. senators and politicians and government have been quite vocal about protecting the Maine industry against that report. Are you aware of anything that DFO has been doing in the U.S. to counter the myths that were perpetrated in that report?
Thank you for the question. And no, I'm not directly aware of any discussions between DFO and U.S. senators or NOAA, although I do believe DFO and NOAA are talking about the comparability findings for Canada, which is a bit of a separate issue. One thing that we've done is we've been sharing information with our counterparts, the National Fisheries Institute, to try and help deal with this issue on both sides of the border.
Thank you, Mr. Perkins.
Excuse
we'll
me.
now go to...
Okay.
Somebody say excuse me? Oh, no, well...
sorry about that, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to add something to...
I'd ask you to send it in writing. We're going over the
Okay.
time allotted to Mr. Perkins for questions and answers. We'll now go to Mr. Morrissey for 6 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Chair. My questions are to Ms. Giffen. Ms. Giffen, could you outline to the committee any protocols that were in place this year by DFO in the Gulf that, in your opinion, are redundant and you would be comfortable in removing those, would have no negative impact on potential U.S. retaliation?
I guess I would point again to the exclusion lines. No, actually, it wasn't mandatory this year for weak links. So off the top of my head, I don't have one. If I think of one later, I'll send it in. Apologies.
Okay. Thank you. So nothing that was taking place this spring was redundant in your opinion. My next question would be, has the catch of lobster or crab been negatively impacted? Have the catches gone down since the narwhal protection measures have been put in place?
Is that to me again? Apologies.
Yes.
So, in my opinion, not that I am aware of because of the management measures for lobster. There were major challenges this year with the snow crab fishery. It is a quota fishery and not competitive. And because the whales were circling more looking for food this year, it did create longer and much larger seasonal closures, which actually box the island snow crab fishers out of their normal fishing grounds as well, and they struggled to catch their quota this year.
The quota?
Yes, for snow crab.
Okay, thank you. As well, what would be the impact? We've heard about the impact on some of the measures from cost factor. Has the PIFA with other groups done any analysis of any of the financial impact if we were restricted in the U.S. market for lobster and crab?
Not that I'm personally aware of. I believe the Lobster Council may be working on items such as that, but the PEIFA has not been working on those.
Ms. Griffin, you're somebody I have a lot of view, a lot of credibility on your scientific approach and your biological background. We've heard a number of presenters present about the shortcomings on some of the protocols that DFO is considering and looking. Could you advise the committee, if you don't have it today, if you could advise the committee in writing what, in your opinion, would be measures that could be put in place that would protect the North Atlantic right whale and allow the fishers to put in place those practices? Because we've not heard a lot on possible solutions. We've had a lot of questioning about some of the protocols that were being considered, like breakaway rope to term, retrievable buoys, but we have not heard, that I recall, much evidence given or testimony on solutions that you would view as workable. Could you comment?
I can, yes. Thank you. The key one is the one that we put in our opening statement from the PEIFA, and it's related to PEI fishers only, because as has been pointed out numerous times, what works in one area won't work in another. But because PEI has a shallow fishery compared to other areas, an exclusion zone for those weak links would be a major help on PEI in terms of the economics and
Melanie,
the time.
Could you expand? I don't quite understand. You mean an exclusive zone? Could you expand on that?
Absolutely. So if DFO set it and say at 10 fathom, anybody who fishes within 10 fathom, if the gear is within 10 fathom, then the weak links are not required. It sounds simple, but it actually saves about 99% of island fishers time and money, and it's also a very low risk area based on sightings where we've seen whales in the past. So within 10 fathom, not requiring that mandatory measurement for weak links would be a huge help here on PEI.
Relates to the crab fishery in the Gulf, which is pursued in deeper water. Recommendations that you view as workable to one, because I believe one thing we all agree on is protecting the North Atlantic right whale, and in deference protecting our access to the key U.S. market. I mean, it's 70% of our market. Obviously, it sends shivers up the spine of all fishers to if the Americans toy with that. We experience in PI, as you're aware, with the Americans closed the border on PI potatoes and the shock waves that sent through that industry. So on that side, if you could provide additional testimony written to the committee on steps that you would like to see this committee recommend to DFO to both ensure the protection of the whale but allow the fishers to maximize their fishing effort. Is that something you could comment on?
We can submit those comments, and that was specific to snow crab, correct?
And lobster as well, because it is starting to look at lobster.
Yeah, we can submit those. I think on the snow crab side, we definitely want to see the adaptability that others have been talking about in those seasonal closures. That would definitely assist our snow crab fishers getting out there, but still protect the whales at the same time.
Thank you, Mr. Morrissey. We'll now go to Madame Debienne for 6 minutes or less, please.
Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. According to what I'm hearing today, I will put my question to Mr. Landsberg, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, so I'll just say Paul. I'd like your view on the department, on DFO's contribution or to the weighting that DFO puts on human impact. Is DFO taking into account the human impact as much as the impact on whales in protecting our reputation with the U.S.?
Thank you for the question. I think DFO often tends to look at the ocean ecosystem and marine mammals more so than the industry as an economic driver for coastal communities. So yes, I think they are putting more weight on protecting the ecosystem and various parts of it more so than looking at how to do that, as well as promote the growth of the industry, if that answers your question.
Merci.
Thank you, Ms. Griffin. What we're hearing today on the whole is that fishers want to be consulted more. You seem to have a fairly simple solution that would basically deal with 99% of the problem for fishers. But since you're a biologist and a scientist, you would like fishers to be consulted more, and you would like a certain period of time to be given so that the gear can be adapted. Is that your view? Is that how you see things?
Yes, it is. And I will point out that the 99% number is for Prince Edward Island fishers only. As pointed out, something different will work for other people in other areas.
J'aimerais entendre.
I'd like to hear each of you on that. Can we agree with the fact that the January 2023 date for implementing adaptation is too quick? Would you prefer there to be a better balance between the human impact, as we heard in the first part of our study today? We heard that a lot of anxiety was being generated among fishers, and fishers are trying to get all their fishing done quickly in case zones get closed down, and this is creating a lot of tensions. So would it be easier if there were more time to implement new requirements, and should those requirements be more adaptable? Should there be some flexibility in the adaptations for each region? I'd like to hear from each of you on this.
So I don't mind jumping in first to say that more time would be excellent. I mean, we found out that it was gonna be a mandatory implementation in 2023, and when we only have a 2-month season to trial anything, so when we attempted to get gear for the spring season, procurement of that gear became an issue because it's mandatory in all of Eastern Canada. So everyone's trying to get their hands on it. So that left a small period to trial some gear in LFA 25. And yet it's meant to be mandatory in January 2023 when 3/4 of Prince Edward Island has not had an opportunity to even trial and see what could work for them in their area. So absolutely more time from a PEI perspective would be appreciated.
Est-ce qu'on a du temps pour les autres?
Is there time for the others to answer?
Okay, I'll go next. I definitely agree. We definitely need more time to see what will and won't work, and we need more time to provide consistent, reliable input. Like, we just can't be thrown into these measures, right, to satisfy our counterparts across the border, right? And it's not that, again, as an industry, we don't want to protect the right whales. It's just we have to protect our crew as well. I mean, if we're using gear that's deemed unsafe, because then what? Then who's responsible? We definitely need more time.
And very quickly, I have no problem with aiming high to achieve high. So ambitious targets are always a good thing. But I think we also have to be realistic. And I think you've heard overwhelming testimony so far that the current targets or deadlines are not realistic or feasible.
Thank you, Madam Debian. We'll now go to Ms. Barron for 6 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today. I'm going to ask a fairly quicker question, and then I know my colleague, Mr. Morrissey, has some more questions that he's very keen to ask, so I'm going to pass the remainder of my time after that question over to Mr. Morrissey today. My question is to Ms. Allard. Ms. Allard, you had spoken about the impacts of gear marking requirements that were put into place about 1 month prior to the season commencing. And I'm wondering if you could share a little bit more around the economic impacts, the challenges that were experienced as a result of that.
Thank you again for your question. I am going to defer to my colleague, Melanie Giffen. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for the question. So basically what happened was about a month before the season started, DFO announced the mandatory requirement for gear marking, and it became a scramble on the East Coast for people to find the proper colored twine. There were issues that came up, and trying to get answers out of conservation and protection officers here on PEI became a challenge because they didn't even have all of the answers to the questions that we had. Economically, I don't have valid numbers to give you on the economics of it. I just know that it was a struggle and a challenge that this office had to face constantly each day to try to find twine, to try to make sure we had all the proper information about where the markings went. Some of that wasn't even decided when the mandatory measure came out. So it just creates chaos. And if all those questions aren't run by, or the management measure isn't run by industry first, then those questions are going to continue to come up. That's why industry conversations are such a key point when introducing anything like this.
Thank you, and with permission, I'll pass the remainder of my time to Mr. Morrissey.
No problem. You have about 3.5 minutes, almost 4.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to my colleague, Ms. Barron. I want to go back to Ms. Giffen. Ms. Giffen, there's been a number of opinions expressed to the committee about the recognition that the acoustic sounding devices are key on establishing when right whales enter particular areas, but they haven't been used in practice to determine when you could reopen. Could you opine to the committee on from your knowledge as a biologist, scientist, is that sound technology that we could be using to more target opening and closings, particular closings? We do it very well on closing zones, but we're not using it on opening, reopening. Could you give the committee your opinion on the validity of this technology to reopen zones?
Yes, thank you for the question. And absolutely, the technology appears sound. In a majority of the buoys that are out there are real-time buoys. So they're picking up the whale calls, which are identified quickly and determined to be right whales, and the closures take place. I know we just had a technical working group meeting, and they told us that there were 84 days that there were acoustic soundings heard. Therefore, any of those days around that there were no acoustic soundings could possibly eliminate and be used to understand better when there's no whales in the area. It's absolutely sound technology from that perspective, in my opinion.
So, as a biologist, you're comfortable in recommending to this committee that technology should be considered seriously by DFO in establishing methodology to reopen zones?
Yes, I think the key there is that each buoy only controls 9 grids.
Okay. Chair House. Oh, wealth of time. Thank you. My question is to Mr. Landsbergen. Mr. Landsbergen, the concern I have as a parliamentarian that represents a large fishing area so dependent on lobster and crab is the access to the American market. And your organization, if you were advising the committee, you are advising the committee, if you were advising DFO, where should the department caution on ensuring we meet the protocols the Americans are insisting we meet to maintain access to that market, or continuing to maybe go it on our own to the annoyance of the Americans? Could you give an opinion on that?
Certainly. As I said in my opening remarks, Canada is taking a dynamic approach to the closures in order to protect right whales, and I think you've heard overwhelming evidence that that is more effective than static closures, and it's not as disruptive to the fishing industry, even though it's not perfect. I would hate to see us take a less effective approach because the U.S. government would think that's a better approach. So the challenge is, how do we take a most effective approach and convince the U.S. government that we're achieving the objectives of their legislation as it pertains to us, and not following necessarily the same methods. It's the outcomes that are the most important, and I think DFO has been very strong with it, NOAA, to convince them of that, but we'll only find that out over the next month or so.
Thank you, Mr. Morrissey. Now it's time, I guess, to say goodbye to our witnesses, because we have committee business we have to do, and we have a dead stop at 6:15. We do not have any services beyond that point, unfortunately, and we have to do drafting instructions and talk about travel. So we have committee business, and it takes a few minutes to do the change over to go in camera. So I want to say a big thank you to Mr. Landsbergen, Mr. Barron, Ms. Griffin and Ms. Aylward for spending their time with us this afternoon and sharing their knowledge to the committee members. And I'm sure it'll be valuable information for when they actually do the writing of the report. So I'm sure the analysts have taken some great notes from all your testimony, and I think some was asked to send some information in writing. If you think there's anything else you want to add as witnesses, by all means, please send it into the committee, and we'll incorporate it into the final study with recommendations. So again, thank you. We'll take a quick recess now while we switch over to in-camera.
Thank you.